Greetings, music fans. My name is Gavin Stewart, and I'd like to talk to you today about an old school way of discovering new musical ideas, particularly on guitar. How the heck did people know or learn how to play songs back in the pre-internet era, back in the 70s, back in the 80s? Well, maybe they were very fortunate and they had a guitar guru in their neighborhood that they were able to take lessons from. However, I can speak from experience that there weren't all that many people out there back in the day giving guitar lessons who knew how to play all those intricate Eddie Van Halen licks that you so desired to learn. Maybe you had a friend, a knowledgeable friend who was a few steps ahead of you, and that friend was able to offer you some advice, some guidance, show you some things on guitar that you didn't know previously. I would suggest, though, that most people back in the 70s and 80s who were interested in learning new material on guitar didn't turn to a guitar teacher or to a friend so much as they turned to their own ears, which is a very different way from how people operate today when it comes to learning new material on guitar. So what did this mean? Well, they would secure a recording of a song they wanted to learn. Maybe it was on cassette. Here's an ancient artifact for you, Jimi Hendrix Experience Electric Ladyland. And so they would stick that cassette in their cassette player, and it involved a heck of a lot of hitting rewind repeatedly, often dealing in very, very small portions of a song, trying to figure out what was going on. Maybe it was a record album. Here's a classic for you, Led Zeppelin 2, 1969. If you're working with a record album, that meant lifting the arm, right, of the recording device, lifting that needle repeatedly. Regardless of whether it was a cassette or record album, it was time consuming, it was tedious, and depending on your skill level, it may not have been all that accurate. I'll come back to that point of accuracy in a moment. Today, we live in a world of information, and it's a glorious world in this regard. Chord patterns, solos, even lyrics, they're all just a few clicks of the keyboard away. And this access to this information saves a tremendous amount of time and energy. And assuming that you can separate the good stuff from the bad stuff, right? And part of that is just experience, right? It's really a wonderful world of information that we live in. And I would not want to go back to the old days in that regard, at least. So why am I talking about this? What I'm going to suggest to you is that the old school approach of working with a recording, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a cassette, right? It certainly doesn't need to be a record album, but going to a recording and not going to a tutorial or a lesson, but simply using your ears to try to figure out what's going on, there are some real benefits to that. The first one is fairly obvious. I think all of you can guess this. It's great ear training. Not relying on the visuals, not relying on guidance, not mimicking what someone else is doing right there in front of you, either in person or on the screen, but relying on your ears, your intellect, your imagination, and trying as best you can to figure out whatever it is you're trying to figure out. The second, and this is really the whole key to this video, the second positive aspect of figuring things out by ear is actually an example of something not so great, something bad leading to something good. In the process of trying to figure out a song purely by ear, you may find yourself stumbling upon ideas, riffs, techniques, chord patterns that have very little to do with the recording you're listening to, and therefore these are ideas, techniques that perhaps you can start to claim as your own. The process of stumbling in the dark, using just your ears to navigate, can lead you to things you wouldn't get to otherwise. And if you're listening not only to the recording, but listening to yourself as you're trying to figure out whatever it is you're trying to figure out, you may find that you discover things that are uniquely you. And that ultimately is one of the primary goals of any musician, right? We already have a Jimi Hendrix. We already have a Jimmy Page. Your name might not even be Jimmy. You have to find the best version of you. And one way of doing it, I would suggest, is at least for a little bit, sitting down without the visuals, without the tutorials, and discovering what you can discover by just using your ears. Even if it's just for a few minutes. See how it goes. And if we're going to fast forward to the present, after you've done the old school approach, you can avail yourself of the current technology. And as the math teachers in the room say, check your work. See how you did. So I encourage you to try this out, see how it goes. If you want to send me a comment and let me know how things transpired, I'd be eager to hear from you. If you liked what I had to say today, please hit like. If you'd like to meet again in this forum, please subscribe. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Take care.